An Apple a Day. Academic Lust Book 1 by B.J. Malone. Chapter 1. Frustrations, Reservations, and a Plan. "Come in." The voice was loud, terse, and emotionless, as Margaret Adamson sat behind her desk in room 77 on the first floor of Oak Valley High School. Her glossed, cherry-red fingernails were tapping in perfect rhythm, yet in sheer, hostile annoyance, on the beautifully stained oak dress, which was aligned perfectly straight, diagonally, in the right-hand corner of her room. The turning of the doorknob was slow and hesitant, yet the oldness of the door was such that the squeaking of it was audible, being only partly obstructed by the repetitive tapping of her fingers, each hand starting with the pinky and ending with the thumb. The plain, stained door was light and bright, and as it gently pushed open, it was almost as if a slow, new burst of life was enveloping itself for the very first time. As the door reached its full open capacity, a full head of short, spiked, blonde hair slowly, almost hesitantly, peeked itself around the side of the doorframe. His face could see Miss Adamson's head was down and focused on her fingers. His breath was now a sour lemon, and the size of a grapefruit, all combined into one unpleasant sensation, which at this exact moment was now flowing all over his body, leaving an impression in him to want to throw up and see the nurse, even it was only a reprieve. Just something, anything, to avoid Miss Adamson and her stare of death. "Mr. Allen, what took you so long?" Her voice was a four-part mixture of cold, icy, robotic, and unforgiving, all combined with an outside exterior of aches and pains with the early arrival of Mother Nature's white flakes and blistering gusts as it arrived in the last week of October. "Sorry, Miss Adamson. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't disrupting or interrupting you." His voice was stuttering. Almost a combination of submission and shame was written all over his perfectly clear and freckle-free face as he walked into her classroom, empty-handed, his body covered by the thickness of his golden-brown varsity jacket. Margaret finally looked up. Her eyes peered over the top of her bright red-rimmed glasses to see Mr. Jock in popularity, of not just the school, but also to the town of Oak Valley itself, standing in her classroom without the suave cockiness and overflowing sense of confidence he usually displayed. No, today was different, as she stopped her dual tapping. She couldn't help but think to herself how ironic the scene in front of her was. Here now, not 3 feet from her desk, was the talk of the town and school. A young man whose talents and gorgeous looks had gotten him anything he had ever wanted without even trying, was standing in front of her, uncertain and scared. She wanted nothing more to test him by seeing him squirm, awkwardly in a way, sort of payback for the unpopular kids, herself having been them and having been subjected to more than her fair share of picking, mocking, and criticism. As ironic as it was for her to remember the pains of her own high school life now, more than 2 decades since she walked across the stage, in her cap and gown to get her diploma, she knew she couldn't do anything to him. The first reason was that she was of the utmost of professionals and would never do anything that could come close to being construed as immoral. The second was, as a teacher, she had a job to do, and a responsibility to her profession, and nothing, not even good looks, or a years-long cynical grudge against everything that she wasn't, would interfere with that. "It's fine, Sean. Please, have a seat here." Her pointer finger was extended out to the desk and chair, not 6 inches in front of her desk. "Yes, Miss Adamson." Sean's voice was shaky and quiet, almost a whisper, as he walked to the desk and seat. Each step of his spotlessly clean designer tennis shoes was causing the recently waxed floor to squeak each time. The screeching sound made Margaret roll her eyes and groan each time it happened. She hated noise, and the slightest imperfection and annoyance lately sent her into a borderline rage. But so far, she had managed to keep her bitchy alter ego under wraps and buried within the contours of her soft and luscious body. Finally, Sean had reached the chair, as a quiet, low, and inaudible sigh escaped her full, strawberry lips. Her body, however, was still as tight and rigid as the 5 minutes before when she demanded his presence. "Good. Now, Sean, do you know why I've asked you to meet with me today?" Her tone of voice was still stern, yet her body position had softened ever so slightly. Yet for Sean, any change of her appearance or attitude at this moment was a welcoming sign. "I'm sorry, Miss Adamson, but I don't." Miss Adamson groaned now, and there was no denying that it was not kept within her, but it was loud enough for even Sean to hear. She got up from her soft, black, leather chair, making sure to run her hands down the part of her skirt that was hidden to Sean to make sure it was as perfectly straight as the rest of her outfit was. With a few quick passes of her full-length black skirt, she reached over and grabbed a collection of 7 papers connected by a staple and walked around her desk to grab a pen from her Puppies in Snow coffee cup, and with her right hand pulled a stray chair and sat down right next to him. She could barely hear Sean's groan. No doubt it was in frustration, or yet another moment where a teacher who didn't understand just who he was, going to nag and annoy him with more complaints and grievances about what he wasn't doing, or the things that he was doing and why they were wrong. Usually Margaret would unleash her verbal venom on any other student who groaned when she was getting ready to speak about their academics. Sean wasn't just any other student, though. His parents were well off financially and donated much of their time and money to the school, and as alums never missed their son play football, basketball, or baseball. It was that unfortunate fact that made her have to bite her tongue and exercise discretion and restraint. One thing that a free spirit and opinionated woman like her hated more than anything else in life. Censorship was against anything and everything within her body, yet also, as a realist, she knew that there were moments in time where you had to play the game, and unfortunately for her, this was just that time. "Sean, I want you to look at this and tell me what you see." The statement shook Sean. The cold, icy voice was now even more profound and more sinister than he had ever seen or heard before. However, he had learned from the earliest of ages to respect his elders. So, with a deep, sarcastic, internal huff, he reached out his left hand, and with a touch full of reservation, grabbed the papers at the bottom and pulled it close to his piercing blue eyes. There, on the top of the dull white and light, straight, blue-lined paper in the margin, was the one thing that made his heart sink, and his life at this immediate moment end. There, in bright red ink with a perfect circle around it, stood one big block capital letter F. Sean's eyes were as wide as saucers, as the symbol of failure showed its ugly and sadistic face, its sharp points mocking and ridiculing him, and his latest attempt at intelligence and academia was proved to be a failure. I see an F, Miss Adamson, but I don't understand how. His voice was calm and reserved, but she could see it in his eyes. Typically, any other student who was struggling in her class would be scared and nervous about their parents' reaction. However, she could see Sean was not terrified. Hell, he wasn't even breaking a sweat. To her dismay and rising boils of anger, she could also see the smallest forms of a smile start on both sides of his mouth. She knew he was going to try and use his name and popularity to the principal, and with his parents to try and once again smooth things over and give him a pass from anything intellectual and academics related. His goal was to merely flaunt his last name to focus on all three sports, to which he always produced personal fame and collective titles, to not only the school but to the community as well. Margaret knew plenty of other students who had attempted to use connections to get out of doing schoolwork in her classes before. As a public school teacher just starting her 19th year, at the start of this past August, she knew full well the fake tears, cheesy stories, and lame excuses hundreds of students before Sean had used to avoid doing any tough assignments, and just hoped and prayed for a boring class and easy A. Yet, Margaret had denied all of those requests before, and Sean, even with his mouth-watering good looks, he too would be denied.
Sean, you know exactly why you failed. You come into my class late, when you bother to show up. Those rare days you do, all you do is look at all the girls in class or talk to your friends, and interrupt what I'm trying to teach, making a mockery of me, and what I'm trying to do here, you understand?
Her voice was low, yet extremely stern, as her hands were now on both sides of Sean's desk, leaning over Sean's eyes, and for that matter, the rest of his body. Now, completely hooked and memorized by the sight not only a few mere inches away from him. Now Margaret had always dressed professionally and respectfully, for not just for her gender, but for her body and image as well yet. However, there were two parts of her that not even the baggiest of clothing could hide from overexcited and hormone-fueled, crazed high school boys. Her tits were just another set in the long line of pride in the Adamson family. End of chapter 1.